Anita, thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me, Nate.
It's my pleasure. So I want to talk to you about the new State of Culture report that just got released by Nectar. Now, the report kind of kicks off with this statement that the stakes feel pretty high right now, but the bar is pretty low for culture. Can you talk a little bit about why that's the case and what that means?
Yeah, I think we're in a new modern age Wimbledon match between employees and employers and who is holding the bag. And right now, employers have all the power in this two-sided relationship. So the employers are here and they're saying, well, there's nowhere my employees can go to get a job. We're glad that they're here. Why do I still have to pay for this? Why does it matter? Do I have to focus on these things as much when they're not leaving me? And it's just like we're taking things for granted. And employees feel that, leaders feel it. And I think we saw it highlighted in the correlation between lack of leadership engagement and lack of employee engagement. So it's a unique time for all of us.
So talk to me a little bit more about this pendulum, the job market pendulum, and why it puts the power in the hands of either employers or employees.
We've seen it go back and forth, and now we're in a place where AI is coming in. A lot of companies are looking to get more efficient. Employees are nervous about that. I mean, I was just talking to a teammate of mine that I had for 3 years on the phone on the way down here, and this person would love to find a new job, and there's nothing out there. And they're not happy in their current environment. So I think they're seeing that their leaders are caring less because there's nowhere for these people to go. And so right now, employers really have all of the control. I think we're taking our talent for granted and we're like subconsciously not investing in it in an authentic way. And so the bar is dropping.
And what's the risk?
The risk is that people are just phoning it in. And it's a bigger risk today than we've ever seen before because leaders are phoning it in as well as people, right? They're like, is AI going to take my job? I don't know. I'm just going to sit here and invest and collect my check and see where this all goes. And I think the majority of people are doing that, right? If you look at the 80%, you always have the top 10% that are really pushing the needle forward. You always have the bottom 10% that are always just going to be the bottom 10. But it's the middle 80 that we've got to be concerned about. And we have to go to them and say, what does engagement look like for you right now?
I feel like there's this dual narrative where when employees ask for more from their employer, they're seen as entitled.
Yeah.
And when employers ask for more from their employees, they're seen as like maybe tyrannical or impossible to please. Why does it matter to listen on both sides when either the employers or the employees are asking for more?
I really think, and this takes a lot from leaders, but co-creation is important, right? You're a new leader of people, right?
Yeah.
So you have two roles. You're an employee, but you're also a leader.
Yeah.
And so there's things that are important to you that are different than when you were an individual contributor. And now you have to listen to this team and you actually have to get them to perform to results that they may or may not know about. And so I think there's always time for a conversation to say, what do you think this work is about? What do you think is the most important? And how can I help you get there? Those are 3 easy questions that any leader can ask anytime and all the time. Anytime somebody is like, fire this person is not performing anymore. The first question I ask the person is, do you know what you're responsible for? And they tell me. And then I go back to the leader and I'm like, what is this job responsible for? And the answer is different. And the whole thing could have been saved if they just talked to each other. So similar, we talked about defining engagement. I think we have to define expectations. Otherwise, like I love Mo Gaudat. I don't know if you've ever read his book, Solve for Happy. So he gives a formula for happiness. And I think it's so great. So basically it's expectation plus or minus that person meeting or not meeting those expectations. If they exceed your expectation, you're happy. But if they drop below it, you're unhappy. And most of the time, we expect people to read our minds.
Those expectations are unexpressed.
That's right.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you what I really need. I just expect you to know because you're my leader.
So Anita, in this report, I think the most interesting part, and it's the part that we kind of lead in with, are the 3 engagement killers as rated by it's over, I think it was 12,000 full-time employees that we surveyed over the course of a year. Those 3 culture killers were communication, recognition, and compensation. Mm-hmm. So can we spend a minute and talk about each one of those 3 culture killers?
So communication is a really interesting one. Anytime I'm doing all company communication, I work really hard to be very clear and very specific around what I can be. And when I can't be, I say, I can't talk about this right now. And I let them know, like, this is an off limits topic and there will be a time for me to be able to go deep with you on this, but today is not the day and I'm sorry. And this is where you're going to have to trust that either I've earned your trust to this point or I haven't. And when the time is right, I'll be able to bring you in.
Yeah, I feel like the scariest time for a leadership team is when there is nothing to say. Not necessarily the scariest, but it's like the most impactful.
Yeah.
When there isn't a big announcement, when there isn't like a lot of information that you can share, it's just easy to remain silent and fall out of the cadence or the rhythm of keeping your people informed. And that can be really dangerous because I know as an employee, I've been in situations like that. And you're right. Like the first thing you do is you fill the void with assumptions, with rumors, with I think it's natural to go to the worst case scenario. And it may not be based in reality, but I don't have anything else to hold on to.
Right. Or Fishbowl, right? I'm going to go and voice it on Fishbowl and have a bunch of other people jump on the story.
Yeah.
And that's really dangerous for cultures. And so that's where I think you have to be checking those sites regularly and as a team, work it into your cadence of communication. And then if you say you can ask in a town hall anything, you have to address those things. Or you have to say, hey, you've asked this question 4 times. I'm not answering it again. Please refer to this person to get more information, to get the clarity that you need. And I think sometimes, like I've learned this before, I've tried to Pleasantville communication, and it does sound very political, like you're just trying to make everything nicey nice. And I think people just want real straight talk. And you're going to pay for both, right? Either it's like you're not being transparent or you're being too harsh and you don't care. I'd rather be straight and to the point and be accused of being too harsh than not honest. And I think it's a fine line for leaders to walk. And this is why communication continues to be a top theme among those 12,000.
Why do you think communication is consistently listed as the number one reason for people disengaging?
Because we don't have a process for it. I think every leader needs a toolkit for communication. So like I love to use this term, centralized and decentralized. I think communication is a centralized toolkit for leaders so employees know what they can count on. And that way you can say, hey, no matter what team you're on, the communication cadence is the same. I think you actually have somebody, whether your company is big or small, somebody's portion of their job is around saying every month we're talking about the state of the business, the state of our customer, what our big initiatives are relative to our strategy. And then outside of that, you customize for the team. And those talking points are doled out, let's say the last week before the first of every month, and leaders go through those things. And then that way you can see, okay, the product team doesn't ever get this information. Why is that? Oh, we've had 3 product leavers in the last, 24 months. We've struggled with that. So that means another leader needs to come in and run that cadence so people don't get forgotten. But if you have everybody making up their own cadence, then you can't really decide, is communication effective or is it not? And then you can say, we talk about executives exiting, we leave it to the teams to talk about team turnover. We leave it to the teams to talk about team promotion. But that's also a misstep because then people are like, no one gets promoted here, right? They don't hear about the promotions in sales or the promotions in customer success because their team's centralized. That's why like a centralized platform is so important. You can say, look at all the promotions we've had over the last quarter across every team. Go recognize and congratulate these people.
So this playbook that you just outlined it involves a couple of different things. There's like a strategy behind it. There's specific roles and responsibilities behind it. And there's tools that need to support it as well.
Right.
But one thing that I'm hearing you, I'm hearing you paint the ideal picture for maybe a larger company as well. And I think one of the reasons that communication creeps up as a problem is because as companies grow, they don't know at what point do we go from, sending out an email or doing an all hands meeting and the 40 people in the room are just all on the same page. And then you get to maybe 100, 200, 500, 1,000 employees. And it's like, at what point do we start transitioning our strategy and making it more standardized and a little bit more structured?
The survey question that I would point to around this is, I know how my job connects to our strategy, mission, or values. And when you see those scores drop, it means that we need a more centralized, focused approach on communication. This is where leaders have to make time to lead. It's like an expansion of role as companies grow and making sure you're focused on that all the time. And the survey scores are the indicator.
Let's dive into the survey scores a little bit more.
Yeah.
How can you use surveys to specifically identify when a communication breakdown is happening?
It's a great question. So first you have to define what you want to measure it on. Is communication with the intent to connect people to mission, value, and strategy? I like that one a lot. And if that's the intention, then that's what I'm going to survey around. And those surveys are probably going to be once a quarter after I ship out my quarterly strategy. Let's say I'm on a quarterly system. But I think when you do strategic planning every year, the next follow-up question is, how do we communicate this? And is what we've been doing for communication over the past year been effective? Let's go back and look at our scores. Do we want to up our survey cadence to be every other week? Are we going through a lot of change, or we want pulses, 3-question pulses? But you've got to get this one right. You have to do it so you can look week over week or month over month or quarter over quarter and know whether you're making progress. And when we change out teams and we change out leaders, everybody wants to change their Likert scale to a different scale, or they want to change their questions. You can't do that because then you don't know where you are. And especially if you have a hybrid or remote team, you've got to keep the questions the same, even if you disagree with how they're written or how they're scored.
Let's talk about the second engagement killer, recognition.
Yeah.
Why do you think this shows up at number 2 so consistently?
I really think that people are disassociating recognition with the core of where it comes from. After diving into this, I really think recognition is gratitude. And I think as a society, especially in America, we've become pretty self-centered as like a society. And when we do that, we lose the ability to be grateful and think outside of ourselves. And gratitude is actually one of the key indicators. Like if you go through any program, they're like, what's the first thing you can do to get yourself happy every day? It's to wake up and name 7 things you're grateful for. And if you can do that, and one of those things is around something that happened at work, go use it, go share it, and share it authentically. Don't do it because you have to get surveyed around it. Do it because somebody really made a difference for you, and you want to say thank you. And if you need more, I encourage you to go to your leader and say, if I'm not doing anything right, tell me. But if I do something right, please tell me that too. It makes a difference for me. It makes a big difference for me.
So I think there are a lot of jobs that are not as visible as like a sales role, that are kind of thankless. And the only time these people get noticed is when something goes horribly wrong.
Yeah. So basically the data would tell us, right, Nate, that roughly 50% feel like they don't have meaningful recognition at work. So you can use that as just know that half of your team doesn't feel like recognition is used effectively.
Yeah.
And if we take your question and we go back to your first culture killer in communication, these two are tied together. So if you look at the leaders that are best at communication around wins for their team, that's gold. That's currency, right? Like our IT team has had 320 days of uptime before the first tip over. And this was the day 321, but we're grateful for the first 320 that we experienced no outages, and that's amazing. What we learned from this outage on day 321 was that we need another backup this and this and this and this, and you can count on us to get that handled. So it's like they're masters at communicating what's working and how what's not impacts it in a way that still focuses on the 320 days of uptime. It's really important to look at this article. It was published forever ago by Harvard Business Review. It's still one of my favorites and one of my most referenced in talks like this, is let's hear it for the B players. It's that 80% that we talked about. It's the people that come in and do their day job, like day in and day out, and they're not exceptional and they're not mediocre. They're like your great average players.
Consistent.
They're consistent.
Consistently delivering.
And as businesses, we need that. Like that is our bread and butter. That's the majority of our operating structure. And so that's where peer-to-peer recognition, that's where recognition programs and platforms are really, really useful. And people thrive on the peer-to-peer because we as leaders were too far away to be able to give all of that recognition on a daily basis. And that's where, just like you're looking at your comp philosophy and you're looking at gender discrimination, race discrimination, all of that, if you have a platform or a tool, you can look at those same things through recognition. And we saw that, right? Women are less recognized than men. We see that all the time because I like to take on more. I'm a pleaser. I like to make you feel good. And then I've got to gauge myself so I'm not a martyr on the back end for doing those things. But through those recognition platforms, we can see those trends and we can address it with teams and we can help people say, are you doing this to please, to get recognition? Or are you doing it because you really want to do a good job? And those are great leadership conversations to have. It's growth for people. And if you don't have the data, you can't go after and get it.
Okay, so you just hit on one of the important reasons to have a tool.
Yeah.
I want to have the same conversation we had about the comms situation, where I think there are a lot of founders or leadership teams who are thinking like, yeah, I feel grateful for my team.
Yeah.
Like I have the feelings of gratitude all the time. And like maybe I even express it from time to time. But there comes a point, I think, where you can say that gratitude and appreciation and recognition are a part of your culture because that's how you feel.
Yeah.
And then there's another point where you have to kind of reinforce that and make it real using systems, using training, using tools to reinforce those practices, like the actual action taking part of the recognition.
Yeah.
So can you talk about how does your culture need to change around recognition in order for you to maintain the actual practice of making sure that people feel seen and valued for their work?
This is no different than any other value that we have. So if you have recognition or appreciation or gratitude woven into your values, you know that it needs to become scalable, right? It goes back to like the early days when like maybe the founder is doing the inputs into QuickBooks because they don't have an accountant yet. And what do? They have to stop doing that work and they have to hire somebody they trust to take care of the books. You can look at recognition the same. I, as the founder, had a team of 5. I could deliver recognition on my own, face-to-face, in a small office. Now I have a team of 25. I can't do that anymore. What's the best thing I can do? The first thing you have to do as a leader is demonstrate that it matters to you. So you're showing a few things. You're showing my job is changing, it's growing, and you want to communicate this. And you would say, now my job as a leader is to focus on these things. That means I need to systematize these things. And this is how I'm going to do it. And it's either going to be through a tool or a spreadsheet or whatever it is. And these things you can still count on happening. And we're going to talk about whether you still feel like it's consistent or not. Consistency is the key. But the leader has to be the hub of demonstration. I think a lot of these programs get offloaded to a people team. And I always say, like, what's your plan for performance management? And my answer is always like, well, who's responsible for performance in our organization? It's the CEO. The CEO is responsible for our performance management plan. That's who runs this, right?
Yeah.
Like, who's responsible for recognition in our organization? Our CEO. Because if our CEO isn't doing it, how does the rest of the organization do it?
I know in the report there is some data that shows a direct connection between the frequency of recognition that an employee receives and their level of engagement. Can you speak at all to that data?
Yeah, it's so fascinating. So again, just a reminder, 12,000 employees and how often they received recognition. So 2,000 roughly received monthly recognition. And you can see it kind of gauged to programs, right? Because we have monthly recognition programs, we have quarterly recognition programs, but there were still almost 2,000 people that never received it. And about 1,700 that received it yearly. So it's pretty interesting.
And those were like the least engaged.
The
employees.
least engaged, right?
And then the most engaged were getting recognition how frequently?
So the most engaged were getting it monthly at the 2576.
Got it.
And so it's interesting that employees are losing out on the frequent praise they desire. And what we're seeing is they want recognition more frequently. So I would love to see us up the daily and weekly scores.
Yeah.
And make it specific to what is happening.
Well, and the thing that I'm noticing here is like the thing about consistency that you talked about, how important it is to be consistent. And then number 2, how the bar really is low.
It's so low.
Employees aren't saying like, you need to say thank you every single day for all the work that I'm doing.
Right.
They're saying like, hey, once or twice a month,
right,
just giving me a shout out or hey, saying thanks for the hard work that you're doing goes a really long way.
So long, especially there's a great section in here on layoffs and turnover.
Yeah.
And so if you just took your one-on-one template and at the top of it every week, you said, this is one thing I noticed that you did well this week. That's a great way to start off a one-on-one. And then boom, you up your weekly engagement score on recognition.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a huge differential that you can make just by doing it every week in your one-on-one.
You mentioned the difference between peer-to-peer recognition and then recognition from leaders. And I'd love for you to kind of talk a little bit about that, and maybe also talk about private recognition versus public recognition, just based on your own experiences.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's really interesting that 15% of the employees surveyed said they never got recognition at all. And this is where peers will really save you if you're a leader who's not great at recognizing, because peers are exceptional at this and people love it. So everywhere I've been at, I've always had a peer-to-peer recognition tool. I think it's just a great way to see work that's happening on the ground in a meaningful format. It also allows for the quiet people to be recognized, the introverts to be recognized. They can be seen more through a peer eye. As a leader, we need to be better at those things, but it goes back to communication, and usually those that are slicker in communication get recognized more. So you may want to consider educating employees who are introverts how to communicate their outcomes to gain recognition for promotion and raises, which, raises is the third culture killer, so we can get to that one, but it all leads back to communication. And we now understand why it's number one, right? Because without good communication, you can't get strong recognition, and you probably don't get paid as much without it, to be honest, sadly.
Will you talk to me a little bit about the significance of getting praise from a manager or your manager's manager?
Getting praise from your manager or your manager's manager makes a huge difference. And the reason why is because your work is seen by others, and it's seen by people that can actually give you a pay raise. And we love that. And so it's really important that leadership takes note of what's happening around the organization. So again, if you have a monthly business review, a quarterly business review, I always make sure that I highlight what's happening on my team as team wins that other leaders should know about. In fact, if my team does something that's really outstanding, I will send a note to other leaders and say, will you recognize my team? And I'll help create it, because it won't just happen naturally. It doesn't mean that it's inauthentic, but you kind of have to prompt people and remind them that this mattered to you. And it would be great if you just gave them a nice shout out. Like we do this in recruiting all the time. Hey, we're trying to close this candidate. Will you go ahead and give them a call or send them a text and let them know how much you want to join? And then they join, and that doesn't ever happen again. That happening as part of the employee value proposition is this type of recognition activity from managers and managers. The other way you can guarantee this happens is let people rep their own work. On my team, I rarely ever present work. I let my team present it because they're the ones that did it. And then they can get direct recognition from the team they're presenting to. It's magic. Now, sometimes it's painful, especially if they haven't done a lot of presentation before, but it's opportunity to grow.
Yeah, that's awesome. I love that idea of letting them shine. And not only that, it opens them up to a coachable moment where they can learn to present. They can learn to articulate how their role has an impact on the business.
Yeah.
Not only is it like a valuable opportunity for them to get recognition, but it's a valuable opportunity for them to prove that the communication aspect is working. Yeah. Because if an employee can communicate clearly how their work is having an impact on the team and then on the business, then we know that our communication strategy is working.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
Let's talk a little bit about that third culture killer, compensation.
My favorite.
Okay, I'm glad it's your favorite because it's not mine.
I know, it's hard. It's one of the hardest ones. That's why no matter in any market, it's always at the bottom of top of the list, but bottom of the list.
Yeah, people always feel undervalued. They always want a raise or a promotion.
Yep.
And there's this delicate balance between transparency and fairness. And I think that the dichotomy between a business and an employee is always really interesting because and a business wants to get the best talent for the cheapest amount of money possible. That's kind of the game. And the employee wants to find a company that'll pay them the most for their skills and their talents. But how do we address this in a productive way? Yeah,
the first thing you have to do to address compensation is to have a pay philosophy. A compensation philosophy. It's not complicated. Now, keep in mind, compensation is one word, and compensation to most people can mean different things. So you've got to define it. When I say compensation, I'm talking about base pay, bonus pay, incentive pay, and equity pay. Total cash compensation that you will receive over the course of, let's call it, 1 year. Now, how do I derive that number, Nate? What are the things that I go to look at? I look at data. Well, what kind of data? I can look at any data. I might want to, we're sitting in Utah right now, I might want to look at mountain states. But at Nectar, do you hire people from outside of Utah?
Not super frequently.
Not super
Pretty
frequently.
uncommon.
So your data set should be in the mountain states. If I was hiring people from all over the US, I want to pull down a nationwide data set. I actually know that if I just do mountain states, it's 5% lower than for national data for companies between 200 and 500 million in ARR. Right? If I could have a penny for every time somebody was like, Google doesn't do that. I'm like, we're not the size of Google. Like, if you want to go make Adobe dollars or Google dollars, go to the Magnificent Seven. Like, that's just the bottom line. They're going to out-benefit me. They're going to outpay me. All of those things are going to be better. So what is the Magnificent Seven? So you're looking at the top 7 technology companies that are outperforming, basically carrying the stock market, right? So the NVIDIAs, the Apples, the Microsofts, the Googles, the Metas, that are really, securing all of the top talent and have all of the top tech talent currently.
In the context of the world of tech, this makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
The moment you pivot to a different industry, I think reality shifts quite a bit. Like if you're in education or if you're in telecoms or if you're in manufacturing, a lot of these jobs just can't compete with tech at all.
Right.
And I think the harsh reality that contributes to some of the negative emotions right now that are showing up in the report as like compensation is a big deal for me is it feels like cost of living goes up. There can be an insensitivity to the fact that, food is more expensive, gas is more expensive, like everything's becoming more expensive, but we just can't pay you more. So how as a leader, do you deal with the fact that the economy is tough and people are feeling like they have to tighten their belts a little bit and there's just not a ton you can do?
So I know there's no one that's going to like this answer, but how do you get real with people when they're asking for more and you can't give more as an organization? And I think you have to decide where you can give more. And it's not always in cash compensation. We look at that first, but you have to be willing to say, we're going to be average on cash compensation. That's part of your pay philosophy. We are going to be more than average maybe on your benefits. Like if you're in Utah, we have more babies than any other state in the union. So we're really competitive on parental leave. We're really competitive on health insurance premiums for families. And that's why you would want to come and work with us. Like you can make that part of your value proposition. We are really competitive on time off. You're going to get more time off here, but you're not going to make as much as you will in other organizations. You can also, I think, start to have a conversation around, while it's more expensive for you as the individual, it's also more expensive for the organization. And we are here to provide jobs and we don't want to do layoffs. And so I've said this before, and it sometimes doesn't land super well. Yeah. We're not going to do layoffs, but we're also not doing great raises. But what the value of that is job stability. So if you want a stable job and you want a thing that you can count on as far as your paycheck and your benefits go, this is the place for you. Are you going to work with top talent? No, you're going to work with great humans. Top talent can also be great humans, but It's different, right? Are we going to go try and crush our competition and get to market the fastest? No. And so you have to be able, that's like the transparency that I think people are craving.
I agree. The last thing I want to hit on is I think that the perception of the gap between a leader's pay versus a frontline employee's pay. And I think in an economy where things are difficult and you have employers coming forward and saying like, we can't really give you a whole lot, we can give you some stability. But then the perception is that the leaders of the company are not making concessions to maybe help out the frontline employees who are really struggling to have a hard time. Maybe they have a really nice house or drive a really nice car or going on nice vacations and it's just unrealistic for anybody else. I think it can create a sense of resentment and frustration around the compensation conversation where it's like, well, of course you can stand up there and say that because you're taken care of.
I love that. That's like real conversation, right? Yeah. And those are the conversations we need to be having. So what I hear you saying is like, what happens when you see leaders going on nice vacations, driving great cars, and you're like, but we're going to pay at the midpoint and we don't have as much money to pay you. Yeah. So there's a few things because I've sat on both sides of these conversations. The best CEO I've ever worked for went by the same pay philosophy that everybody else did. Right? So at the time we paid 50% on cash, 75% on equity for nationwide for companies 200 to 500 million in annual recurring revenue, right? So that was the comp philosophy. And he fell into that. Now, if you look at that data for CEOs, they make a lot of money, right? Like they're making a lot of money but it is the same philosophy. So that's when I love to have a growth conversation and say, okay, how much money do you want to make? Like what's your total target comp? And then we can go through, and this is where we were talking and debating transparency of bands, but this is where leaders need to understand compensation bands and to say, if you want to make $20,000 more a year, it looks like these 5 jobs are the most adjacent for you. Now, how do we move you into that job in the next 12 to 18 months? Are you patient enough for that? Do you want to go take a risk and go to a startup that's willing to close that gap for you, but may not be in business in 12 months? I had a lot of people.
Skills?
Do you want to learn those new skills? Do you want to work harder on these things? Do you think this is the path of your career? This is where I really want the ownership to come back to the employee, but it has to be guided by a leader who cares. And that combination is magic. And that's where you actually get, I've had people stay because I'm just providing them opportunities to learn and grow. And they know that I'm going to remove those roadblocks absent being paid at the midpoint, right? But it's being open and saying, where do you want to be? What are your goals? And you as an employee have to know that. Most people that ask me to mentor them have no idea what they want. And it's really hard to lead when you as the employee don't know where you want to go. Now then you as the leader have different work to go do. Help them, give them different opportunities, work through it with them in their one-on-ones. But let me be clear, you have to do your current job with excellence. Like you have to keep that pace going and make time to learn new skills. And most people don't want to do that.
Yeah. There is that trade-off of wanting more for what you're doing and then being realistic and having a specific goal that requires more of you to achieve what you're asking for.
Now, you could go be a project manager in Boston, and that will pay 20% more than it will in Utah because there's not as many project managers in Boston.
Right.
Now, your cost of living will go up 10%, your benefits might go down, and it'll probably be a wash at the end of the day. But you'll make more money. So I think there's all of these things to consider. And this is where I really urge leaders to gain proficiency in compensation so they can speak to it and feel confident about it. That's the biggest change I think that leaders could make in alleviating compensation as a culture killer.
All right, so there's another section in the State of Culture report that talks about turnover and retention. And that's what I want to address right now.
I think this is really important. You know, the bottom line, Nate, you and I kind of talked about this. People are less loyal. And companies are less loyal.
Yeah.
And so when you have that, you've got this. In 2024, 43% of employees plan to look for work. I mean, so that's like, you know, we had the quiet quitting. I don't think that's stopping. So employees are getting creative in their ways that they want earning potential. And I think it speaks to companies being leaders being less engaged themselves. And so many companies have gone through layoffs, right? In all facets. I think it's really great because healthcare is still going really strong. Construction is still going really strong. And education continues to stand out there. So if you want job security, I think it's important to go to the industries that are done by hand and to look for jobs inside those places. If you see companies doing layoffs, I think you have to be good at negotiating your package. And this is a skill, actually. I was talking to somebody that works in an industry done by hand, and he was saying to both of us, he's like, I negotiated my package because of what I saw all of you do. And so because he heard of us talking about what we did for layoffs and what we would do for packages. And when he started with this company, he put together a killer agreement to start as a new hire that covered all of these things and protected him. And I think that's something we've got to see employees doing. You've got to take care and protect yourself because I think most companies won't. And I think we're going to have more negotiations around new hire offers than we've ever seen before, especially for hard to find talent in layoff scenarios.
What advice do you have for leaders that have to do a layoff to minimize the impact on the company culture?
So the advice I have for leaders that have to do layoffs and you don't want to impact company culture is this. You will affect company culture. Lay off once and cut deeper than you think, right? So if the numbers show that you need to cut 10% to get back in line, cut 20 and then be done. And really, really manage your hiring and do it in a way where the leadership team has to be accountable for not doing another layoff. The biggest mistake I've seen since we've gone through this layoff era is that companies didn't cut deep enough and had to do it multiple times. And when you do it multiple times, there's no way to restore. right?
Brutal.
We've all felt it. We've seen it. It's like LinkedIn post after LinkedIn post. It just was round 5 at company X, Y, and Z. The other statistic is just because you're laid off doesn't mean you're a poor performer. This is straight up about survival of the fittest for organizations right now. So don't discount somebody that was laid off if they go through your hiring process.
There's something about protecting the people who stay, because if you don't, 60 to 70% of them are going to immediately start looking for something else. They feel like, am I going to be next? Am I valued and appreciated, or am I just like a number? And when your employees feel like just a number, that's really problematic. Their morale decreases. I'm sure this will play into the Sunday Scaries part a bit, where you start dreading going to work every day because you just feel exploited and taken advantage of.
Well, and then you have the people that are staying on your payroll, looking for another job on your payroll in a company that is clearly not performing because they just did all these layoffs. So that's why if you do layoffs, you have to be really prepared, I think, for a year of non-performance in the business. And that's where leaders have to be having those conversations with their boards, with their investors, because you have to rebuild trust and show that you can get back to performing with excellence if you're going to go through layoffs because times are so dire.
How can job security or lack thereof impact culture overall?
You know, psychological safety is a big portion of security in jobs, and employees really crave it. And you can see in this data, the question is, are you worried about your job security in your current role? And the percent of employees that are worried about job security are, it's high, between 27 and almost 40%.
Over a third.
It's over a
Almost
third.
Approaching half.
It's really, and actually, I think this is worse than people looking for a job. Because you have employees just in fear. They're like, when am I going to be next? When am I going to be next? Will I get a severance package? Will the package for me be as good as the last round? Will I get a package at all? Do I have enough tenure? They don't know all of these things. And that's where, if we go back to the number one culture killer in communication, it's to explain, we're doing layoffs. These are the packages that are going out. This is what's going to happen. This is what happens if you stay, and how we're going to guarantee job security. Like, some of the best companies right now evolving through AI are training that third of their employees on how to use AI to become more efficient, how to manage the hallucinations and the outcomes of the AI agents. That's really useful. So you've got to get people back focused on what they can do to build. The more time they have to create stories, like we talked about earlier, the worse the performance of the business is going to get.
Yeah, this is a communication thing again.
It is.
Well, I think one of the best, I talked to an internal communications expert a couple months ago, and one of the things she said was, one of the most important things you can do when you're communicating, especially around something that's tense or difficult, is anticipate what are the emotions or the frustrations, the pain points that your employers are going to be feeling. And when you have a riff, a layoff, when you have a leadership change, when you undergo any sort of big transformation or transition at your company, you have to think strategically about how it's going to make your employees feel. And then your communication needs to address those emotions.
Yeah.
How do I, in the world where we might be doing a layoff, like we do a layoff, how is it going to make the employees who stay feel? And then how can I communicate to them in a way that addresses those specific fears and anxieties and worries that they have?
Yeah.
And does it authentically and honestly?
It's so important. So one example, I work for a company where we closed down a variety of offices to build 2 central hubs. And we did it in a cascading format. So how the communication is done is actually just as important as what is said in the communication. So how it's done is the cascade. So we started with most senior tenured team members with the announcement. And we got feedback and questions that we put into every new script that we did. Now, you've got to be really good at this because it still has to be tight because the message is going to get out. So literally, we did communications for an 8-hour day. And we started at 9 a.m. with the most senior teammates. And then 90 minutes later, we went into the first office that was closing. And then 90 minutes later into the second office that was closing. And then 90 minutes later into an all-company, all-hands. And at that point, we had kind of got a sense for what we were hitting and missing, and our comms was evolving all the way through. So by the time we got to the all hands in the company, we were able to really hit a lot of those topics. And look, people weren't happy with the message. You're not trying to make people happy. You're trying to get to clarity on, do I understand, like you said, how it makes me feel and what is next for me? And when you do it in that cascade, you get all of those Easter eggs along the way. They will help you. whether they're angry or not. You just have to take it as feedback and not get emotionally into it and deliver that day to get through it. And it's hard, but it's also great because you end up being better than when you started and doing the right thing for the company strategy. And look, I remember I was like in tears getting up for this all hands, and literally it was just, it was authentic, but we did it, and it was as good as it could be.
Yeah. Underlying all of this is this I think this fear that a lot of employees have right now of, am I going to have a job tomorrow? Am I going to have a job next year? Should I just always be looking? And especially if you're in a situation where you do your company is relatively stable and you have performers that are doing a good job, like, it's more important now than ever to reassure them and make sure that they know that they're valued and that they're doing a good job and that they're not going anywhere.
Yep. It's so important. Just to say that is like, you're doing a good job, and I will do everything I can to keep your job secure.
Yeah.
And as soon as I know something, I will let you know. That's a big thing too. But you have to build that over time. So my team always knew that I probably, I'll always overshare as a leader, but they always know where they are. And if I haven't shared it with them, it's because it's like so top secret. Like they know the boundaries, but you have to build that trust over time so that when you get in these pickled situations, you have trust. You can't generate trust through these types of scenarios. And a lot of companies miss with that.
Talk to me about burnout. Why is this negatively impacting culture and especially retention and turnover?
Well, because look, I have to do more with less. Here's a quote. I do more with less approach leads to burnout, which is very disengaging, but I power through because I need my paycheck to survive. And I think we're going to see more and more of this. So you lay off a third of your staff. Now everybody has more work. Nobody's renegotiated the goals or even thought about renegotiating it. And so they're just feeling tired and stressed, and they have life situations that inhibit them from going out and having the luxury to look for another job. That is a luxury. So we can't downplay that. And then they're just stuck in this grind. And that's why it's so important to think about this. If you're going to do a layoff, how are you going to be proactive in decreasing and adjusting workloads so people aren't doing twice as much? It's just not feasible. And I think if that's the approach of leadership through the layoff, you need to reset as a team. And that's where strong leadership from all roles, not just the people function, is critical to say, play this out. To your point, how are they going to feel? What's actually happening on the floor? Because at this point, it shows that on average, 45% of employees experience burnout. So they're exhausted, they're overwhelmed, they feel insecure, and if they can, they're looking for a new job. They're not focusing on your business right now. Like, let's just be straight. They're not.
Not as much as they could be if they're in a good space. So here's my burnout question for you.
Yeah.
How much of managing burnout is the employee's responsibility versus the employer's responsibility? Like, what responsibility does an employer have to their employees to manage their burnout for them?
We could talk probably a whole segment on this. Yeah. I think burnout is a created human state, just like happiness is a created human state. And it's something that you can attach. And it's a big word right now. Everybody's like, oh, we're burned out. I think a lot of it is created through the media and what we're reading. And you read through and you're like, oh, I feel overworked. We did a layoff. I feel insecure. You read this.
I'm burned out.
Right? It's being created in your head. And so I think the question you have to ask yourself as the employee is, what does success look like for me? Does this job meet my life criteria? And can I do my best to grow whatever the objectives are I have for myself inside this job with this leadership team? Yes or no? Like, look at it objective. I do believe burnout is real, but how long are you going to stay in that state? Like, staying in burned out doesn't help you get to your next promotion or job, so you're not serving yourself in it. So what is the path, and how do you use the people around you to help you move through the path? And that's where I think the leader can come in and have that conversation. You're leaving me with the experience that you're really tired and overwhelmed right now. How are you doing? And how long should we stay in this space together? How long do you need my support? Because the longer we stay in this space, we still have this thing called business outcomes that we have to get to. And just being straight about that. And how do you want us to partner to getting you to the other side so you can actively deliver on your work? Is that possible? These are hard conversations to have, but we've got to have them.
But on the one hand, like, you do have business initiatives, goals and things you have to hit. But on the other hand, if you're there for somebody through some of the hardest times in their life, the level of loyalty that they will give you on the other side is incredibly high in most cases. And so that's always going to be this trade-off of, like, you know, if somebody's going through a difficult time, how much can we loosen the strings a little bit and be patient while they work through things. And then there's also the expectation of, are they proactively trying to get themselves out of it? There's also the question, I think, of how much of this is because of us? How much of this is because, hey, we did lay people off, or we have had a big change and their workload has been magnified, it's grown. They're dealing with the stress of change and trying to manage what these new expectations look like now. How do you manage that kind of sense of accountability on the business side of saying, like, hey, we're throwing a lot at our employees right now. We need to give them some time to adjust and maybe pull off the gas a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great question. So how do you manage what the business needs with employees that are genuinely suffering?
They're humans.
How do you manage employee suffering with business need to perform? Those things are always at odds.
Right.
And so I think
I think that a lot of businesses, their solution is, let's get rid of the suffering employees and bring in fresh people who don't
and make them suffer.
Yeah, they don't have the history with us, so there's no baggage. And if we can just we'll just let all these sad people go, then we'll bring in people who have enthusiasm and excitement, and they don't have the baggage, and we'll be okay.
I think my feedback to a leader that said that is that after you just did layoffs, you're not hiring anyone. Like, we've seen this with a number of companies along Silicon Slopes, is when you go through series and series of layoffs, you're not actively hiring enthusiastic people. You're hiring people that just need to get a job, and you happen to pick them up. Right?
Yeah.
So I think that's one point that we don't want to miss. The other thing is, there's two things you can do to get yourself out of this. Leaders, when you have a layoff, you need to go through your goals and go back to your leader or set of leaders. I encourage you to vet this across a series of stakeholders that you report to or have impact on the work, and say, okay, we've had a layoff. I've lost a third of my team. These are the things that we're going to deliver on in the next 6 months. What's missing for you? Okay, if I pull that on, this one is going off. Does that work for you? Leaders need to really be out in front of this is what we're doing and this is what we're not. I would be willing to bet that we're all doing work we don't need to be doing. We're just not talking about it. And this is where we're back full circle to communication. Leaders have to be proactive in saying, this is what we're getting and this is what we're not. And this is where I'm going to manage my team to. And if it doesn't work, let me know. That's where working and influencing across leadership is really, really important from a skill set. And so, are you running a tight ship right now? If your team is really humming and you have had a layoff and you've got back to neutral, are you running it so that if you decrease by 20% more, you could handle it? That's the best time to address these things, and you can get through most things unscathed if you're proactive in it.
Great tips. Let's talk about the Sunday Scaries.
Oh,
I'm noticing these things all bleed into each other. You've had the Sunday Scaries?
I have had the Sunday Scaries.
Tell me about it.
I've had the Sunday Scaries in times where I've had to do layoffs, in times where the business isn't performing, in times where I can't be totally honest about what's happening, in times where I have personal things that are taking up more than I can give because of work, and I feel out of harmony between those two roles that I play. And it can be a fight sometimes, and sometimes it lasts a week and sometimes it lasts a quarter. The definition of Sunday Scaries is when you feel like you are dreading going to work on Monday. And so your energy decreases every hour you get towards bedtime, preparing to go to work on Monday.
Yuck.
And as a leader, it can be really bad.
For me, Sunday Scaries has a lot more to do with the environment that I'm showing up to on Monday. Do I feel safe? Do I feel seen? Do I feel like I can be, there's a way for me to be successful? I mean, I don't even know how you measure for Sunday Scaries.
It looks like...
Is that something that you've ever measured for as an HR leader?
I haven't, but it says that on average, 40% of the employees we surveyed said they experienced Sunday Scaries as they prepared to return to work for the week. So I think it'd be great as a leadership question, when you have your weekly all hands, you say, do you have the Sunday Scaries? Do an impromptu anonymous survey and have people send it in, and then follow up and say, what can we do to fix it? What would it look like? What would work have to look like for you to love going on Monday?
Great question.
Right?
Yeah.
Wouldn't that be a fun discussion?
And way to collaboratively solve the problem.
Totally.
Yeah.
Together.
Yeah. If you're experiencing this as an employee, how do you bring it up?
You could say hey, on that Monday meeting, I'm so grateful that we're going to get together and do it. I think we could be better prepared if we moved it to Monday afternoon and we had Mondays to prepare. Because right now I'm feeling really stressed. I can't do family dinner. I can't do Sunday night activities, whatever it is. And I would be better for you, actually, if we moved it to Monday afternoon. Would you be open to that?
That's a great example. Now, I want to twist the question a little bit. What if your manager is a big reason for the Sunday Scaries.
Yeah.
Like maybe they make work feel unsafe. Maybe they are like micromanagey, or maybe they're bullies. Maybe they
have no life and they just work.
They make you make you feel invisible. They have unrealistic expectations.
Yeah.
And you're waking up every morning just dreading going to work.
Yeah, find a new job.
Okay. So don't bring it up to your manager. Look for a new job.
I mean, I think you could give it a go.
Yeah.
And say, would you ever be open to the possibility of changing this? But it sounds like in that example, there's a lot more wrong than just the Monday meeting that's creating the Sunday Scaries. Or you didn't even have the Monday meeting in this scenario, right? You were just dreading the interaction with this leader for all of these psychological safety examples, right? Not feeling included, not feeling heard, not feeling safe. That's really tough. And look, I hate to say this, but I think we would get along better if we just recognize that most people don't change.
Yeah.
Like, as I hear you describe that leader, I think it's a low odds bet to think they're going to change.
I appreciate the honesty in your answer. And even just asking the question, I can feel like the tension in my body, just remembering.
You can see it.
Remembering these moments of having the Sunday Scaries and feeling so crappy.
How can we fix that, right? And I think that's where, to your question, it's back to the individual and saying, I don't want to live this way anymore.
Yeah. And as a manager, how can, this is a question for us to reflect on. I'm just thinking about myself as a manager. How can I show up for my employees and be conscious enough to ask that question of, are you experiencing the Sunday Scaries, and what would have you excited to wake up and come to work on Monday instead of dreading it?
Yeah.
And is there anything I can do to help you get there?
Yeah. The other thing is, you can also say, like, there's cycles we go through, like, especially if you're leading a people team and we're going to the back half of the year. And the back half of the year is tough. And I think if you have a leader that just kind of names it, it can also get better. And you can have those conversations. And every year it does get better.
Yeah. I can see how so much of being a good leader and running a successful business with a great company culture has to do with just being willing to speak to the things that people are feeling and maybe don't want to talk about, or acknowledge the things, the elephant in the room. Just saying, hey, this exists. And now that we've named it, now we can do something about it. We can have a conversation about it. And I think there's a real, just natural human behavior is if something makes you uncomfortable, you want to create distance.
Yeah.
You want to put as much space between you and that uncomfortable thing as possible. And that avoidance strategy, I think, is what ends up magnifying a lot of these problems for a lot of employees and managers.
I think you're right. I also think that once you become a people leader, I'd be curious for you. When you became a people leader, did you feel like all of a sudden you weren't allowed to share your emotion with your team anymore?
No.
You
I didn't feel that way, but
good.
I'm a weird exception to the rule, probably because I'm a highly emotive person.
But that's awesome, because I think a lot of people love working for you because they know where you are.
Yeah.
And if you don't feel connected with your leader, like your leader is honest, then, but you got to be, it's a fine line.
Yeah.
Because if you're sharing everything or why you're upset or why you're, not engaged, that'll translate. But you also have to be real enough so people know where you are.
That's a leader that people will want to follow into battle. We led into this conversation saying that the bar is low, but the stakes are high. And so going forward into this next year, what should companies be looking at to have the highest impact on company culture and employee engagement with the lowest investment? What should be the strategy going forward to maximize engagement and optimize culture?
So what I hear you asking is, like, what's next? If the bar is low and the stakes are high, what can companies do today to maximize engagement with the least level of cost? You know what it is? It's us asking people how they're doing. It's showing that you care about them. It's one question that makes all the difference is, what do you want to do with your career? Where do you want to go? You don't need a form. You don't need an individual development plan. You don't need a template. Just go through a series of questions and say, how can I help you get the most out of this chapter in your career while you're on my team? What can I do better or different for you? What could I do to make this experience more meaningful for you? All of these things are free. Now, here's the caveat. You can't ask these questions and do nothing. Like, pick something that's meaningful for you to do. You could just put on your calendar, and I do this a lot. I live and die by my calendar, is to say, I'm going to give recognition once a day to somebody on my team. And I'll block out 15 minutes on my calendar. No one can block over that time. And I'm just going to spend it on recognition every day for 15 minutes. I mean, we spend that much time on LinkedIn. Why not give it to recognition? I'm going to recategorize recognition as gratitude because that helps me give it more effectively. I'm going to think about communicating pay more transparently and better. I'm going to learn more about pay. I'm going to think more about communication this year. Like, pick just one. It doesn't have to be all of the things you've talked about. Pick one of the things, put it on your calendar, spend 30 minutes a week, and you'll be better this time next year.
Based off of our conversation, what are some things that come to mind that would be like, this would have an immediate impact?
Yep.
And then something that might require a little bit more planning and effort, and then something that would be like a longer term initiative.
So one thing we talked about is at the top of your one-on-one with your team member every week, writing down something they did great and sharing that with them. That's a quick hit you can do this week, right now, in your one-on-ones. Just
weekly
gratitude to that person. The medium-term thing that you could do is start your communications cadence. As a team leader, you can count on us to have monthly all-hands, departmental weekly meetings, bi-weekly one-on-ones. That's our cadence for the next quarter. And at the end of the quarter, we're going to do a quick survey on what worked for you and what you'd want to change. That's like a medium range thing you could do. You could even say, hey, as a company, we don't think about how we're going to share these communications. We're going to put together a quick slide on what company team members can count on from all of these different modes of communication. And then a long-term plan would say, how do we define engagement? How do we define communication? Do we have a compensation philosophy? How well do we feel we can communicate what that is? And how prepared are our leaders to speak to it? Those are great long-term goals to work towards.
I love those goals, and I like just the practice of, after listening to something like this or reading the report, thinking, what can I do right now that could have an impact, that could make a measurable difference in the attitudes, the behaviors, and the emotions that my employees, my team feels? And then number two, what's a quick win that might take a little bit of planning, and then what's a long-term strategy that we need to implement that it's obvious, we need to get better because we're losing.
Yeah.
What would you say to people who look at these types of conversations or even this way of thinking and they see it as just too soft? There's not a measurable, put it on a spreadsheet and this is the impact that it has long-term on the business that feels really obvious.
Yeah. So I think there is put it on a spreadsheet and see the impact over time. So I do think there's that.
I appreciate the pushback.
Right? Yeah. But if you have a leader that isn't in it, don't judge it. The worst thing we do is we label things good or bad. And I would really encourage us not to do that. So if you have somebody that's I think this is too soft, it doesn't work for me. Okay, great. Do you see it as a problem? Back way up.
Yeah.
Do you see it as something that we should even focus on? Yes or no? Why? Use it as an opportunity to get more curious, to understand the place that person is coming from and find a way that works for them. We may have a leader that's never had that experience before and it just isn't who they are. So what are the ways? You can even ask them, well, how do you like to receive recognition? Well, I don't. So you don't want to make any more money. That's a way of recognition, right? Oh no, I love a pay raise. Okay, great. So your way, it's kind of like the love language conversation, right? You have to know your customer. What do they like? So anytime I start with a team, I always kind of go through a sheet in my first one-on-one. What kind of praise do you prefer? Public or private? Words of affirmation, gifts, cards, candles, puppy hugs.
I'm literally going to go develop a 5 love languages for business. Yeah.
Yeah, let's do it. But get to know your people and what matters to them and follow that as you go through your relationship with them. It's just like a CRM. I've always wanted a CRM for the human side. And I think I've always kind of made my own. It would go a long way. Because think, if my team went to you and I could tee you up and say, Nate, you're getting 10 of my team members and here's how they love to be recognized. Here's their birthdays. Here's their anniversaries. Here's the things that they do well.
Here's what matters to them. Here's their core values.
Yes. They have parents that live in Europe. They have kids who are out in college at these locations.
So the big opportunity I'm hearing you say in this next year going forward is just showing through your words and actions that you care about your employees.
Yeah.
And that regardless of the job market, regardless of how hard things are, how little turnover you may be experiencing, you're going to get more out of your employees if they feel seen and valued and heard. They're going to be more engaged in their work. They're going to be less worried about their position dissolving. They're going to want to give more to you as a leader just because of how you show up. That's the key.
And if you're in person, I always love taking in blueberry pie. And I sit in the lunchroom and I just see who comes by. right? And I just talk to people. If I'm remote, I love doing like those Orbit meetups. There's a technology where it matches you one-on-one for like 10-minute coffee chats. So you can like get to know people. This is where these conversations happen. And so you have to create space to get to know the people.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And take the initiative to do it.
Yeah.
Like, I think it's easy to sit around and wait. This is one thing that it's like a life lesson I had once where I was complaining that like, my social circle doesn't feel like what I want it to be. I just don't know people as well as I just don't feel like I'm being included or invited. And then somebody was like, well, how often do you invite? And how often do you include? How many lunch appointments are you initiating? Or how many people are you inviting to hang out with after work? Or how many of your coworkers did you invite to go play a game of golf? And like, yeah, you might see these people out doing that stuff without you, but it takes a person to initiate it.
Yeah.
And sometimes I think it's easy to sit and feel like you're waiting, you're on the outs looking in. And I think especially as a leader, it's your job to be the one who's initiating those conversations and trying to make those things proactively happen.
I love this example because these are like the lost list, the hidden archives of expectations of a great leader.
Yeah.
Right? And what leadership book does it talk about those things that you just mentioned? And we know that when you do those things and you take action and you initiate and you include, it makes a difference.
Yeah. Getting back to the soul of work.
Yeah.
And the soul is interpersonal connection.
It is.
And we can't succeed without each other as much as we like to think that AI will do it for us.
Yeah.
Like, it's just not going to. And those relationships really do matter.
They do. You want to go win with a team.
Yep. And the teams that win have high trust, high accountability, and are great at communicating with each other. They coordinate really well together. And that's everything that showed up in this report is we're not being great team players and we can do better.
We can do better. And the bar is low. So if you just do one of these things, like you can make a ton of progress.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you, Anita, for sharing.
Thanks.
This is great. I loved your expertise and your input.
Thanks for having me, Nate. Great to be here.